let's get into the topic. So is wholesaling becoming illegal? So this is becoming quite the conversation across the country. And what you're looking at on the screen is basically South Carolina. And I want to give credit to my buddies at Real Estate Skills. Alex Martinez is one of the owners. Actually, fun little story. Alex Martinez runs this amazing coaching company now for investors as well. They have an amazing blog, Real Estate Skills. I really like their blog. They put a lot of time and effort into it, and I pulled a lot of the things from the blog for today because they really do stay on top of it. And Alex Martinez was actually one of my acquisitions guys. He started with me as an intern years ago at the flipping company that I ran in San Diego, and now he's a successful investor, successful educator, I would say an influencer in a space, which is awesome. So I just want to give him a plug because this is where I get a lot of the information from for today. So is wholesaling real estate legal in South Carolina? I started with South Carolina because that's been in the news lately the most, because that is now officially passed, right? And you can find the blogs at realestateskills.com, Valley. But the South Carolina one states this: wholesaling real estate in South Carolina is legal if investors abide by the rules and regulations set forth by the state-specific laws governing real estate transactions. Now, you might say, wait, I thought it said it was illegal if you even heard about it. The way they describe it, after doing their research, they believe that it is legal, okay? That said, South Carolina wholesale real estate laws are constantly changing, effectively allowing the South Carolina Real Estate Commission to regulate the real estate industry and protect the public's interest when involved in these transactions. Case in point, the latest amendments to the South Carolina Code of Laws. And on May 29th, 2024, the House Bill 4754 from the South Carolina General Assembly signed into law. This bill adds Articles 9 to Chapter 57, Title 40 of the South Carolina Code of Laws, updating the regulatory measures for real estate professionals in the state. On the surface, the latest amendments appear to prohibit the act of wholesaling. Per the amendment, particularly Section 40 through 57 and dash 3350 in the South Carolina Code of Laws, it is explicitly stated that a real estate brokerage firm and its sub-agents are prohibited from engaging in, representing others in, or assisting others in the practice of wholesaling. And it's interesting, Tamara actually, she had an agent that was looking to join us, and this was actually unfolding, and her and I were communicating on this. So this is actually probably a good thing for you to listen to, Tamara, because there might be ways around it, right? And it's to be seen as it unfolds. As we continue, as a result, real estate investors across the state began to question whether or not they were still allowed to wholesale properties. To be clear, the answer is yes. It's still legal to wholesale real estate in South Carolina. Homeowners want wholesale real estate. South Carolina homeowners want to part ways with, despite House Bill 4754 being signed into law. It is worth noting, however, that the method of acting as an intermediary between sellers and buyers has officially changed because of how the South Carolina Code of Laws defines wholesaling. A key provision included in H 4754 alters the definition of the term wholesaling. Here's what it says. Wholesaling means having a contractual interest in purchasing residential real estate from a property owner, then marketing the property for sale to a different buyer prior to taking legal ownership of the property. Advertising or marketing real estate owned by another individual or entity with the expectation of compensation falls under the definition of broker and requires a real estate license. But this sentence here is key. Wholesaling does not refer to the assigning or offering to assign a contractual right to purchase residential real estate. So then they dive a little bit deeper, okay? There are a couple of important distinctions to make here. And I'm doing this, and I'm going a little bit more detailed in South Carolina because I want to set the precedence of how we should look at this in other states as these laws change, okay? And we have a really good case that's taking place and unfolding in front of us in South Carolina. So that's why I'm going a little bit deeper on this one. So a couple of important distinctions to make here. For starters, the act of assigning or offering to assign a contractual right to purchase residential real estate doesn't fall under this definition. Therefore, it's not the act of assignment that's against the law. It's the act of marketing the contract or property. Additionally, the new bill only prohibits wholesaling residential real estate, which is defined by the South Carolina Code of Laws as real estate, which is used primarily for a personal, family, or household purposes, and is improved by 1 to 4 dwelling units. That means the traditional assignment of contract method is still a viable course of action for South Carolina wholesalers dealing in anything but residential property, like vacant land, which is what I also do, or commercial properties with more than 4 units. So how can I legally wholesale real estate in South Carolina, right? One way of they're proposing it, how investors are trying to already do that are not licensed, is instead of attempting to assign contracts, you can establish a legal partnership with buyers who are actively seeking properties before you start looking for homes to present to them. This partnership isn't just a casual agreement. It's a formal contract where you, as the real estate investor, are specifically hired to find homes for the buyer to purchase. Think of it as offering a specialized service rather than selling the right to buy a property. This proactive approach ensures that you have a clear, legally binding relationship with your buyers in place before a subject property is located, making the entire process more efficient, compliant with the wholesale guidelines of South Carolina. So in retrospect, it's a longer way of explaining reverse wholesaling, where you find the buyers, you have the buyers that are interested in certain areas, you build relationships with them, become more of a partner with them, and say, hey, I find a property, I know I'm only going to you because we're partners, right? Now, I don't know the legality of what the paperwork looks like, and we're not going to get into that here. That's a conversation for an attorney in a state, right? That's the best person to acquire and present them this paragraph, right? As an example, and have them tell you what that could look like. Another recommendation is practical strategy for navigating South Carolina's new real estate laws involves using a bond for title or installment contract. For the record, I don't know anything about installment contracts, so I'm not going to speak about it. However, they are mentioning it as a viable option to explore if you're in South Carolina. This method allows you to gain equitable interest in a property with minimal initial investment while maintaining compliance with state regulations. Again, I would talk to an attorney in South Carolina how this can be done to stay compliant. And then the last one, which is probably going to be the easiest across all the states, if these laws keep going to the other states, you can proceed with a double closing when you've found your buyer. This involves 2 back-to-back transactions. First, you close the deal with the original owner, paying off the balance due on an installment contract. Immediately following this, you close the sale with the end buyer, who purchases the property at the higher price you've negotiated. This double closing allows you to profit from the difference between the 2 sales, okay? So this is what they're proposing. I don't know if this is actually allowed, right? They're proposing it based on their research, and I'm sure they talk to other investors in South Carolina. Hopefully they talk to attorneys. However, the reason I bring this up is because if you Google wholesaling in South Carolina, you might be frightened by seeing that is, you'll just say illegal, it's illegal, it's illegal, it's illegal. Well, is it? And we instead of us panicking as agents who work with investors that wholesale, or investors that, you know, wholesale and work with agents, we got to kind of chill out, read a little bit deeper into the bill, speak to others like these, research it further, and essentially talk to a local attorney and or title company and let them tell you what is the workaround that's legal, right? Because I can guarantee you, even though these laws are coming, and South Carolina is one of the, you know, one of the few that took pretty significant action against it, there will be a way to do it. I have no doubt that we'll find a way, and this is an example. And if these all 3 options are true, there you go. Now, double closing might not be as attractive because you'll have to actually close on a property and your costs go up. So sometimes the $10,000 you're trying to make on a wholesale fee might get eaten up by the additional closing costs, because now you have two closings versus basically having only one. And in the true assignment of contract, the buyer that is taking over your contractual position is going to end up paying their buying costs, the purchase costs, and the seller is going to pay their own, right? But when you're doing a double closing, now you are a buyer from A to B, so you have buying closing costs, and then you're also a seller to the C buyer, and now you have seller closing costs. So you're kind of adding those two additional costs in the middle, and that could technically wipe out your wholesale fee, and it might not make sense, right? So that might not be a great option, but it is an option. So what is that? If that would be the only option in your state that you could do, which I doubt that would be the case, but if it is, and if you really, really want to stay above the line and not take any chances, then this is probably the easiest, safest way to do it. So then you just have to negotiate a lower price, right? And create a bigger spread, right? So instead of having a $10,000 wholesale fee spread, you negotiate maybe a $20,000 wholesale fee spread and allocate, 5, 6, 7,000, which I think is on the high side for closing costs on both sides, right? So either way, there will be a way. So that's South Carolina. North Carolina is already looking to follow their lead. And I'm glad you bring this up, Tamara, because one of the things I did, I listened to a podcast. I like to listen to Bigger Pockets podcast. It's On the Market. It's called On the Market. And I actually listened to one podcast in June where a commissioner in South Carolina, a real estate commissioner in South Carolina, and he's also an attorney, was interviewed by the host. And he spoke about these changes. He actually went into some of the ways around the law. He's like, you would think I'm a real estate commissioner and I want to, kill wholesaling. He's like, that's not true because I'm an attorney. He's like, one of my biggest clients is an investor that does a lot of wholesales. So that's not going to benefit me. However, he goes, I do go to all the meetings for all the real estate commissioners across the country. And I think they have them quarterly. And he goes, interesting thing that he stated, and he goes, few years ago, 3-4 years ago, no one brought up wholesaling in their agenda. Like it wasn't even a topic of conversation. He's like, the last 2 years, I think he said, it's been brought up every single meeting. It is an item on the agenda every single time. He's like, so it's not, is this going to go and trickle out to other states? It is. It's just, how are they going to take, well, let's say, what South Carolina is doing in other states and implement it to their own, right? Like Tamara mentioned, North Carolina is looking to follow lead. They might literally implement the same exact thing, right? But a lot of other states are kind of sitting on the sidelines watching how's this going to play out, right? Because attorneys are going to pick this apart, right? And they're going to find a way, like we already see, how we can do it, right? So it takes time to flush this out. It's not going to happen overnight where all the states are going to all of a sudden have all these strict rules, but just be prepared that it's coming. When, we don't know, but it's going to start going, right? This isn't stopping this wave, okay? And we as investors, we need to understand and not be fearful of it, but understand how to pivot, how to adjust, how to talk to people that are doing it on a very high level. And I think the first people I would talk to are a lot of attorneys that deal with a lot of wholesalers today, as we speak, right? Because they will also try to find a way, if it's legal, to do it, because they don't want to lose that business, right? As long as it's compliant. So let's look at another state that we should, a couple other states have this. Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, South Dakota, and Wisconsin limit the number and frequency of real estate transactions before you need a real estate license. So this is a thing. Many states are now putting this into law. For example, in Michigan, you're limited to 4 transactions annually before you must have a license. So a lot of states are going in a direction that if you're going to be doing wholesaling, it won't necessarily be illegal unless you have a license. So a lot of states are choosing to go that route. Okay, you know what? Let's not make it illegal. Like South Carolina kind of try to wipe it out. Like, oh, to do wholesaling, you need a license, but when you're licensed, you can't wholesale. So they kind of was like, what? Well, few other states already had this for a while where you need to actually get a license when you do X amount of transactions per year, right? You can't market a property without a license. If you want to assign a contract, you can only market the rights to assign the contract. Understand this critical difference to stay on the right side of the law. Many wholesalers get real estate licenses to avoid potential conflicts or constraints, like I just mentioned. And then you got Illinois. Illinois, is it legal there? Yes, and check this out. As noted, a broker in Illinois has been redefined to include anyone who wholesales more than one property in 12-month period. So you can only do one in 12 months. If you do more than that, more than one, you have to get a license. So some are becoming as strict as that, where they literally will only allow you one, right? Others have 4, right? And then there's Pennsylvania. They've been the latest in the news, and they're making some significant changes. I'm not gonna read that what they're planning on doing, but at the end of the day, it went through the Senate, and it says that it will require a real estate salesperson license under the Real Estate Licensing and Registration Act to conduct residential wholesale transactions in the Commonwealth, blah, blah, blah. There is actually a lot more they're trying to include in that, not just getting a license. It's pretty strict what they're trying to implement. I don't want to talk about it necessarily in detail yet because it's now official, but it's now going to the House of Representatives for consideration. So I want to bring it up more from an aspect that, you know what, states are doing this. This is happening, but to answer the question that we brought up on the beginning, is wholesaling becoming illegal? I say the answer is going to be no. It will just have a lot of different hoops we're going to have to jump through. And many investors are going to get out of the business because they might not do the research like we're doing. And they might be too afraid to keep doing it, not realizing that there's a way to do it with the right team, right? That digs deeper into it, finds the in a compliant way of doing it, finds the right attorneys. If you're an attorney state, finds the right title or escrow company if you're one of those. And you find a way to navigate through it. Because give you an example, in California, we're allowed to do, wholesaling still, as long as it's disclosed to the seller that, we're planning on doing that for a profit, all that stuff. And that's in most. You got to disclose it to the seller what you're planning on doing. And you technically are allowed to use the C money to close. Like, so if I'm doing a double close, and this is might be a little bit technical, but if I'm doing a double close on the same day, I got an A to B, B to C. And I can technically use the C money to close on my A to B transaction. So I don't have to actually bring any of my funds to the closing on the A to B. If I would call some escrow companies, they might tell me, we don't do that. We don't want to do that. Some might even say it's not allowed. But my escrow company, they're totally cool with it. Why? Why would they do it and put themselves on the line if it's illegal? And I know the owner of the escrow company. There's no way that they're doing something that's not legal. The escrow company and title companies are regulated like crazy, right? They have audits every year. There's no way he would put himself at risk. But yeah, they allow it because it's legal. But then you call somebody else and they'll tell you it's illegal and they won't use the C money to close on the A to B. So don't call what I'm getting at, don't call one attorney, don't call one title company and get, and take their answer as truth. They might just not be educated, number one. or they just might not want to take the risk at all of even trying to look into it. So dig deeper, talk to more people, call more attorneys, call more title companies, and you might find out that it's actually quite easy to do, right? That's what I'm getting at. Anything for now you want to add from everything I said, Eric?
Yeah, I would say part of why we're seeing this, like, there's good and bad to all of this happening. Like, obviously, it's going to kind of limit the amount of people that can do it. It's going to limit who can wholesale, how you're going to wholesale. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes state by state. But part of the reason this is being done is just a lot of the people that were wholesaling, or because it became, I mean, like you said, Randy, your buddy, yeah, they never talked about wholesaling. And then a few years ago, it was mentioned on, Bigger Pockets and other investor forums. And it was billed as this: you can get into investing without ever spending a dollar of your money, and you make tons of money. And you have all these people that are on TikTok holding like wads of cash, and like, all I do is make calls and make 50 grand from my house. So the reason this is happening is because there was a lot of bad apples that got into it. There is a lot of people that have gone out and done things to homeowners that have caused them to bring it to the state level. So I see the bad sides of it, and I also see the good sides of it. Like, if there is some
Regulation.
difficulty, yeah, regulation, but also just like difficulty to wholesale, I think you're going to see a lot of people leave it. I think it's kind of like what we're seeing with agents right now with the buyer broker agreement. I think it's going to thin out the people that aren't wanting to do this for a career or take it serious or treat it as a profession, and they just do it kind of on the side. So I guess that's like the one thing I want to add. Like, I know
Yeah.
most people are seeing this and they're freaked out. They're like, "Oh, nobody will be able to wholesale." Though you'll still be able to wholesale. Every state's going to be different, and that's going to be kind of unique. But there's also the positivity of the people that are wholesaling are likely going to have a license, going to be upheld by state law, going to have, E&O insurance, going to have to be held to a higher standard. So that's actually, to me, a benefit. Whoever I'm dealing with, I know is going to be held responsible for their actions if they do something that they shouldn't.
Who, I want to open it up actually, because we have people from different states. Anybody want to speak if you know anything about your state, what's allowed and what might be coming down the pipeline, if anything different? Anyone want to chime in?
Everybody's like, no.
No?
Well, I see something happening in North Carolina that I really hate, and that is wholesalers getting projects under contract, and then they put it in the MLS, and they're actively marketing it, and it says not yet owned, um, owner or something that is not yet owned. And I'm like, what in the world? And I see that a lot. And I guess I was never taught to do wholesaling that way, like to market your wholesale in the MLS.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say probably most states don't allow that. So, wow. So North Carolina, I guess, allows a wholesaler to list the property on the MLS based on
Yeah.
what you're saying, because there's no way
Yeah.
they're, wow,
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty lenient, if you ask.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, most don't allow it. So I can see that going away fast, that one, like
Mm-hmm.
in the new changes. Um, in Florida, Jim Whitaker, I guess if you could unmute yourself, that would be great, Jim. But are you saying, oh, you can't? Okay. So I guess he's seeing something very similar. So Eric, in Florida, is that allowed? Do you know? Like, can a wholesaler also list a property they don't own just through the interest?
It's not supposed to be, but it does tend to happen. All of our contracts down here are signable. So Florida is very lenient on wholesaling, and I haven't heard anything changing anytime soon. And you would be super surprised at how many people will wholesale a deal and the agent has no clue that they're not the end buyer. Like, we had a deal in Port Charlotte that I had a client interested in. He sent it to me and I'm like, dude, it's listed, and it was being shopped as seller financing. So I was like, you know what? And it was marked pending. So I said, you know what? I'll call the agent and just see. And I brought it up to the agent. She's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, this person posted in this group with these seller financing terms. Like, is that what your seller's agreeing to? And she's like, that's not public. That shouldn't be public knowledge. I'm like, it's literally blasted in every investor group on Facebook that I belong to. And she was livid. Like, she was like, he was supposed to be the end buyer. Like, this is ridiculous. And it's like, So our contracts are assignable, and you can get yourself kind of in trouble with that, which I know some states do, but as of right now, they're pretty lax on it.
And how about Ohio? Do you know what is it like there?
Ohio is super lax as well. Both of them are. Ohio, we haven't had any problems. Kentucky, I know Kentucky, they're wanting you to be licensed here soon, and they are wanting. They're also wanting you, like, you're supposed to not be able to market a contract, no advertising a contract. So
You mean
it'll be
you mean not market the property or
both. They don't
oh,
want it, like they're trying to outright just put an end to it. Like they're very not happy, Kentucky, which I'm surprised because it's a little bit more lenient of a state. But Ohio, we haven't had any issues. I've heard of some chatter of possibly requiring a license, but nothing as of yet.
yeah. Another way that might become a little more common, it's a little more work and probably more costly, is, when you have basically set up different LLCs, right? That you're basically lock up a property in an LLC, and then you find the buyer that wants the property, you basically transition ownership. You're selling the LLC, not necessarily the contract, right? And then they become the closing is still with the LLC that was on contract, so nothing was assigned, right? So you stay within the rules, let's call it. And then what really happens is the buyer becomes the new owner of that LLC at the day of closing. And you remove yourself from being the owner. And that is for a fee, right? So they're buying the company, which happens to own a property that just closed on it, right? So that I can see that happening more and more. The challenge there is you're gonna, have to have, LLC set up often, right? Which that's not that difficult nowadays. There's companies that do it very fast. So that's another way that I can see that it's going to happen. I saw houses tomorrow wrote on Investor Lift that showed pending on the market in Jacksonville, Florida. So wholesalers are getting on market properties under contract and selling a contract on Investor Lift. Okay. I suppose that's allowed by a call-in agent like Eric who didn't know about it. Explain what Investor Lift is for.
Investor Lift is a website where you can buy, I thought they were off-market properties, but they're wholesalers that are marketing their properties to end buyers. And so I found one in Jacksonville that I called about, but I always check them on Zillow and Trulia and all the sites. And I saw that it showed pending. And of course, the agent phone number was there. So I called the agent, and the agent did not know that the person who had it under contract was a wholesaler. And I was like, oops. Didn't mean to spill those beans, but yeah, so it definitely happens.
Yeah.
They're also doing it in Georgia too on Investor Lift. Because I get properties from Georgia because I'm interested there. So it's going on, but I've seen more of it now in Florida, a lot more in Florida. Like just recently in the past, probably 5 months.
Yeah, this was Monday for me.
Yeah. If anybody's ever interested about Florida real estate, it's the Wild West. That's what I tell everybody. Having worked in Ohio and Florida, like the stuff that we see in Florida is absurd. Like 90% of the time, I'm like, I don't even know how y'all get away with this. So you see some really sketchy stuff down here.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. So here is kind of how I would summarize in all of this, right? Is I would say, having a buyer's list is going to be very important, right? So I think reverse wholesaling is going to really be, something that as an investor, if you're serious about wholesaling, is where a lot of your focus will probably be on the beginning, having people where you basically know exactly what they want. So you're not marketing it anywhere. You're just going straight to that, let's call them your buyer partner in that specific area, right? And then depending on what is allowed or not within that state, you then just have to comply within can you assign a contract? Do you need to create an LLC, sell the LLC? Like, what are you allowed to do or not, right? In order to fulfill the order for that rehabber, right? For that area, right? So this way you're not blasting the property anywhere. You're not marketing in Facebook groups. It's not seen anywhere. You're making a personal phone call to your partner, right? So that would be a big thing, I believe, going forward. Market the contract, not the property, is going to be a very common thing you see in the regulations state by state, which I think it's kind of silly, to be honest. I don't understand that fully because, like, you still have to mention the property. So to me, there's a lot of gray area in that concept, right? But yeah, I don't know how that's going to actually look in theory, because I believe that that's the same in Florida, and I see everybody marketing the property normally. Like, no one cares about the fact that you can't do that.
Yeah.
So,
Randy, do you guys have net listings in California at all? Is that like any of the listings you guys can do?
no.
So there's, not that anybody would use it, but there's net listings in Ohio. And what it is you agree to a listing price, and then anything above that is your commission. So if I had somebody that they would be willing to sell their property, like, just give me 300, I don't care. You can sign, there are listing contracts in Ohio that you can sign. It's a net listing, and anything above 300 is earned as your commission. So, like, when you were just talking about that, I don't know why, it just popped in my head, like, that would be perfect for somebody who's looking to wholesale. If you got a license and you said, I'm going to get you 300, but I'm also going to go ahead and list it for 340. And if I can get that, then do you agree? And there's people that I know that have used them. I'm not a fan, but they have.
Yeah. I mean, if it's legal and the seller is satisfied, I mean, at the end of the day, it just becomes, as long as the seller knows exactly what's happening, right? That's
Yep.
what they're trying to achieve here, is protect the consumer. And there's many consumers that will allow that for convenience. Like, there's a reason why houses get sold to investors, because it's all about convenience, right? For those sellers. It's not for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So another point would be, of course, double closing, right? Is the safest, like we talked about. Of course, it will cost more money. And then you need to really understand your current laws, but you have to keep an eye on it, because they're going to keep changing, right? So stay on top of that. Limit on real estate transactions per year. That's something you're going to probably see that's going to become very common. It's already, I think, in like 6 states, like we mentioned here. License, right, might be necessary. Not a big deal, because it's not that difficult to get a license, okay? Now, on this topic, I would say a lot of brokerages might be against it. So just because you have a license doesn't mean you can go and work with any brokerage, right? You need to interview them and ask them about their wholesale policies, because, like, at EXP, where I am and many of us are, even here, they're constantly, they allow it with approval, and each state has their own guidelines, right?
Mhm.
So, and they keep changing. And I know, because I've been on the front lines of wholesaling at EXP. We were actually one of the first groups to get approved to do it, because they wanted to test it and see how they can roll it out, right? So it's constantly changing, not only at the state levels, but it's also changing within the brokerage capacity. Some will just say, forget it, we don't want it here. And that is usually the reason, is because the E&O insurance they have doesn't cover it, okay? You might find out that some brokerages won't even allow you to sell your own home as a flipper, because their E&O doesn't cover it, right? It's all about risk management for brokerages, right? Because the more they allow of these type of activities where risk is higher to have lawsuits, their E&O policy is more expensive, right? So don't be mad at the brokerage. Instead, just interview more and see which one allows it and what are their guidelines. And I would also be weary a bit of the ones that kind of just say, well, we don't care what you do, right? Just don't tell us. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that one, right? So, there's a fine line there. I think the way I would approach it, especially that it's in the headlines now more than ever, right? That you probably would want to be with a brokerage that has some level of regulation as well, as long as it's nothing too wild and crazy, I guess. As long as it's explained to you why they're doing it, how can you achieve it? And if it feels good, then that's the brokerage you go with, right? But it's like anything else. You need to interview attorneys and title companies, which is one of the points here. You also have to interview several brokerages, right? Because everyone might say something different, right? So don't go to one and take their word as truth, okay? And as we mentioned here, usually this will pertain to residential, which is 1 to 4 unit properties. So commercial and land is excluded, which is semi-good news for me because I have a business that wholesales land. So that doesn't apply to us, which is cool, but that doesn't mean it won't apply in every state. So I have to check, right? And then the bottom line, even if we find ways to do it and someone tells us a certain way to do it, like we were just, for example, told by Real Estate Skills, apparently there's a way to do it in South Carolina, right? 3 different ways. You might not find an attorney that will be willing to do it right now, or a title company, because it's too soon. They might be like, we don't know how this is going to play out. We don't know. This is a gray area. I understand what you're saying, and I agree. It sounds like it's legal, but I don't want to be the case that gets sued, and then I become the guinea pig for the industry in South Carolina, right?
Yeah.
And get shut down and lose their license. So you might have a difficult time for a while, right? Until someone figures out, and that's who you end up going with from a attorney or title standpoint. So these are some of the main things that I take away myself from my own research, from being in a business in California, now having Eric in Florida and Ohio. I live in Florida now too. I don't have my license here yet, but I see what's happening a little bit, and I talk to Eric on a weekly basis. Anything else you would add, Eric, or anybody here on the panel? Really?
I'll let everybody else go before I don't want to take up all the time. Anybody have anything?
Valley Road,
So,
maybe an opportunity.
here's my question. This
Yeah.
is for you, Randy, or I guess, or any Eric or anybody else. If you were somebody starting from scratch, okay, so you're in one of these states that's starting to crack down, but you're wanting to build a successful wholesaling business, how would you approach this?
Me personally, I would just read up on it. Like, I mean, really talking to the local real estate attorney or closing agent, to me, like talking to a local real estate attorney, they're going to have probably the best, for the most part, pulse on it. But I would continue to find ways. Like South Carolina, there's a couple loopholes. Like every state, there's going to be loopholes. I really don't think the state's just trying to outright kill it. I think they're trying to limit who is doing it. And if you put up some barriers, you're going to really limit the people that are doing it. So I think you just have to find your way around the barriers, and that's how I would personally do it. Most of these states, you're still able to do wholesaling. It's just, it might look a little different. You might have to have a stronger buyers list. You might, like, there's some stuff to it that you're probably going to want to have resolved. One of the comments, maybe an opportunity for wholesalers to partner with investor friendly agents. Like, find agents that also are investor friendly and see how you can work with them to get it done. Like, I do those novation deals in Cincinnati for a guy, and I'm doing a lot of the legwork, but it's kind of a win-win for both. So, talk to somebody who's local and understands the area and kind of help you, make it make sense. So.
Well, and then I think, so it depends, right? So for me, it would be tomorrow, it will be how recent did the laws change, right? So let's say if I was in South Carolina and I just started getting into investing, I would say I probably would focus more on double closings for now until all this shakes out, right? So then I would build a relationship with a lender that does bridge financing, right? There's lenders that specifically specialize in double closing financing, right? So that way I don't have to bring any of my money to the table, right? And if the numbers make sense, they'll lend you that money all day long. It's the fastest money they make because it happens in the same day, right? And if it's a safe deal, and if the buyer's money is not in escrow or in the attorney's escrow account for the closing, then the bridge lender doesn't lend the money. So they have very little risk, right? So basically it just means that I have to lock the deals up at a lower amount, slightly, right? And it might not be that much. You might have to lock it up for only $5,000 less, right? I'm assuming on average across the state, you're probably going to spend $5,000 additional on closing costs when you do a double closing, right? Now, on top of it, though, you have to add the interest to the lender if you're using one. So that has to go on top of the closing costs, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If you have your own money, different, right? However, what you also want to check if the state or if that title company or the attorney is comfortable with using the C's money to close on your A to B transaction, like I did several times in California, right? When I wholesaled some land deals, they were totally cool with it. So that might be another way where you don't have to have financing costs, right? Because it's, I mean, all it is we're just trying to mitigate costs, right? How do we minimize, I guess, not mitigate, minimize costs so we can actually still do business, right? So if you solve the financing piece, either through the C's buyer money, doing the A to B and then B to C, maybe you have, private lenders, right, that you do business with and you can offer them 8%. But you probably want to guarantee them, you want to probably come up with like a flat fee number because 8% on one day is nothing, right? So it would probably be more of a flat fee arrangement, like, hey, lend me $200,000 for this closing that's about to take place tomorrow. But by the way, if this end buyer doesn't fund their money, then your money doesn't get used. So you have no risk, and I'll give you $2,000 or $3,000, right? For just letting me use it for an hour, right? So I think that's where I would start personally. If I was completely new, starting in South Carolina, where I know these laws were just passed, like literally a month ago. And I think there's a lot of gray areas. And I don't know if I would want to put myself on the line yet with it. I would rather have some other people take the steps first, pave the way. I would watch what they're doing, learn, stay in the network so I can continue communicating and mastermind with people in South Carolina, go to RIAs, keep plugged in. So I'm in the know with the movers and shakers, and then continue conversations with the attorneys or, or title companies that are actually open to exploring how to do it. Right? Because on the beginning, I think you're going to get a lot of no's. But what you want to find out, like, okay, I know it's a no right now, but are you open to exploring if you find that if you find a way that's compliant? Those are the people I want to stay in touch with. Right? That's I don't know if that helps, but that's how I would approach it.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you.
Cool. Anybody else? We got 2 minutes left. Any other comments, questions? Cool. Well, so the final answer is that wholesaling is legal. If that's what you came here for, then that is the answer. You might just have to do a lot of different things to get it done, but it is possible. It will always be possible. And truthfully, I agree with what Eric said. The more barriers you put on, more people are going to get out of the business. And I think that's more opportunity for the people that are willing to solve the problem, right? We're going to see literally the same thing like Eric mentioned in the realtor industry with the NAR settlement changes coming. And now we're gonna see the same thing in wholesaling in the states where these things are being passed. It's gonna flush people out. And the ones that rise to the top are people like you guys that are gonna continue getting educated and staying plugged in, right? And learning how to navigate within these parameters that are now being told we have to navigate through, right? And there's always a way, as you're already seeing. So thank you again. And maybe next month we'll do some conversation about novations. So.
Hey, Randy, I was going to say too, the one great thing about it is when we had the crash, our board in Georgia went from 50%. There were 50% less agents. So it's going to do the same thing with NAR. And there's going to be a lot less competition because people that are just like, oh, I can sell one house. You're going to have skills. You're going to have to be you're going to have to know training, and you're going to have to be more educated. So it's going to be a good thing.
Yep.
Yeah, I know. That's the way I look at it. I got into business during the last crash. That's when I got my license and started investing. I had no idea. That's what I was learning. Short sales. Like everybody, and then later I realized that, I was told a lot of realtors dropped out of the business, but I didn't know any better. That's when I got in. So that's where I learned. And I succeeded. And now I'm not afraid of the market crashing because I'll just pivot. Right?
Yeah.
And the truth is what you said, Jim. Less competition. Agents are going to not want to pivot. Investors are not going to want to pivot and learn the new way. And it will just pave more opportunity for us.
Yep. I'll leave you with this, Randy. I was in middle school when the last crash happened. So I was not buying foreclosures, and I definitely was not licensed. I was in 7th grade, just, out here getting passed up by all the deals, man.
Man, Eric, thanks for making me feel old, brother.
I know.
Yeah, I had to leave you guys with that. You guys got all the deals. I was in middle school, going to lunch.
Yes, time out for Eric.
All
right, guys. Awesome. See you guys in a month.
All right, thank
See
you
guys.
Bye.
Thank you.